You know what? Hating Monday is one thing, but being terrified of it is another. Every Sunday evening as it departed from us and Monday approached slowly, my little brother used to get so frightened as if the weekday itself would do something to him. Whenever I asked him about it, his face would just go pale and he would start shaking like a leaf. Thinking he might be getting bullied in school, I asked his teachers and classmates about it, but they all denied witnessing anything of the sort. I thought maybe he is overreacting, and it must be because he doesn't want to go to school like everyone else. Until one day, when I finally understood why he was acting the way he did. My name is Bree Stevia. My parents kicked me out of their home 4 years ago when I turned 21. I would not go into detail about why they did that. Anyway, I somehow managed to survive, but my little brother Mason, who was 7 at the time, rebelled. A week after I got this new apartment in Cheap, I found my brother sleeping outside my apartment door and brought him in. I took him back after spending 2 days with him, but my parents refused to take him in, saying that before leaving, he injured our mom. I had no other choice but to take him with me. It was hard at first to take care of 2 of us, but eventually it got easier because Mason tried to help me in every way he could. Our parents did not stop giving him an allowance in school fees, so it was easier for me to take care of him even more. It was 6 months ago that the owner of the apartment asked me to move out of the apartment, and it was so last minute that looking for a nice budget-friendly apartment was harder. But it might be my luck that I came across an advertisement for an even bigger and more spacious apartment than this one within my budget, so I immediately applied for it. After completely moving into the new apartment, Mason seemed happy that he finally got his room, unlike the last one where the 2 of us had to share. That weekend, I threw a housewarming party for my friends from work, and Mason also invited a few of his buddies. The party was a success, everyone enjoyed it, and they all left after handing me presents. That night I was a bit drunk, so I went to sleep without cleaning up the mess, thinking I could do it early in the morning. But I was awake by Mason's scream that came from his room and ran there only to find him curled up on his bed, trembling in fear. Thinking he might be having a nightmare, I gave him some water to drink, but he did not budge. So I took him to my room to sleep. The next day I asked him about it, but he kept his silence and did not tell me what happened, so I also did not ask after that. I thought that nightmare was just a one-time thing, but I was wrong to assume that. For the next few weeks, the same thing kept repeating, and no matter how many times I asked him, he would just stand still with his pale face without saying a word. I started to feel worried about him, so I talked to Mom and Dad about him. After a few days, our parents visited us and asked Mason to come back, but he refused. As time passed, the screaming coming from his room stopped, and I thought his nightmares might have stopped, but I started to notice that he would seem scared every weekend. It was one Sunday after doing laundry. I went to his room to put his clothes in his room when I saw the plaster of the wall beside his room window was torn up, and there was also wetness there. So I decided to repair it and call for help. "What are you guys doing? Get out of my room right now." The moment he walked into the room, he shouted. As a response, I stared at him in disbelief and couldn't help but notice his trembling body as if he was scared of something. "Come with me." I grabbed his hand and pulled him toward my room. As we got in my room, I locked it from inside and forcefully made him sit on the bed. I was through trying to understand the situation from the sidelines while my brother was suffering from I don't know what. "How would I be able to help you if you won't tell me what the problem is?" I held both of his hands and said while looking into his eyes. "You won't be able to help me," he muttered. "What did you just say?" I asked, but he remained silent. After several tries when he did not respond, I got frustrated. "That's it. I'm taking your room. You will be sleeping here from now on." As I said in anger, he grabbed my hands tighter. "No, please, don't." I could feel his voice shaking. "Give me one good reason why I shouldn't." I had finally gotten to the right nerve and I was not going to let it go. Because he might kill you. He hardly let those words out and was still shaking uncontrollably. I looked at him for a minute, unable to find a correct word to speak, and then finally I asked hesitantly, "Who?" "The boy in the wall. He hates adults." As he said this, I heard screaming coming from upstairs and ran there only to find the two workers passed out on the floor. The cracked wall was even wetter than before, which made me feel uneasy. When the workers regained consciousness, they could not recall what had happened to them and why they passed out. So I asked them to go for now and come back tomorrow to fix the wall. I couldn't get Mason's words out of my mind, which was freaking me out. That night, as I was tossing and turning in my bed, I suddenly thought of checking up on Mason. So I looked up at the wall clock. It was 1:30 a.m. After that, I walked to his room, and the moment I stepped in, I got horror-struck by what I saw. A boy completely wet and covered in mud, like something was crawling on the top of sleeping Mason. And the moment he saw me, he screamed so loudly, it felt like my ears would start to bleed any moment. Before I knew it, Mason came running to me, grabbed my hand, and we both ran to my room. He locked the door from the inside, and I was feeling like my heart would burst out of my chest any minute now. I had never felt such terror in my entire life, and my brother was suffering from this for so long. I embraced Mason and started to cry my eyes out. As we were both freaked out, we could not sleep the entire night. The next day, before heading to school, Mason asked me if I would be okay. And even though I was terrified as hell, I told him not to worry. When the workers came in, I went to the room with them and asked them to break the wall and check if there was something there. For some reason, I was having a very bad feeling about this, and I was right. As they were breaking it, a half-rotten body of a boy was found. I called 911 with trembling hands, and for some reason, I couldn't help but think that the boy's eyes were fixated on me. The cops came and started asking me questions. Leaving out the ghost part, I told them everything about how I wanted to fix the leaking and cracked up wall when we found the body. Within a few days, we moved out of the place, and this time we checked and asked around before moving into the new place. I knew how traumatized Mason might have been, so without saying anything, I started taking him to therapy. A few weeks later, we got the news that they found out who the boy was and how he did end up in the wall. His name was Christian, and he lived with his alcoholic stepfather after his mother's death. They were the previous tenants of the house. Neighbors had heard the crying voices of the boy coming from the apartment many times until one Monday, when the stepfather came in and even more drunk than ever and started beating the child. The voices stopped coming from the apartment after that night, and his stepfather also abandoned the place without even paying the due rent. "So you think he was the one who killed him?" Mason looked at me and asked. I couldn't answer, even though I figured he got this right, and continued driving him to the session that we both needed. Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so. Believe me or not, but coming from a family who has a long history of being exorcist, I have got a strange ability. It allows me to see the ghosts who have possessed someone or are trying to do so. But what is even stranger is that this weird cursed ability only works on Mondays. I know, most of you think that people like us are scammers or something because of real scammers who taint our reputation, but not all exorcists are scamming others. My name is Gina Blair, and I'm a 16-year-old girl who has exorcist blood journey. Someone with an ability like me is born once in 3 decades, and whenever they are born, either they die at birth or survive only a few years. That was the reason I was so precious to my family. It might occur to you that since I had training since birth and have such ability, I might be a strong and brave girl who is always ready to fight an exorcism. But I'm not. I'm just as cowardly as others if they were to face a ghost like me, because every time I see one, I'm terrified to the extent of passing out. That is the reason I made my parents enroll me in school just like the rest of normal students, and it was my first day there. Just like others, I was to stay in a dorm, but my father sent my Aunt Dana, who was also my age, along with me. Unfortunately for me, my bad luck followed me to school, and the first day of my school life was Monday. The moment I stepped foot on the campus, I bumped into a guy, but I got this weird vibe, but I was sure that there was no ghost on him. It was so weird that I kept staring at him for a few moments. "Isn't it too early to have a crush on someone?" Aunt Jenna said while laughing as I watched him walk away. "I'm not having a crush, Jenna. It's just there is something weird about that guy. I just can't put my finger on it," I said, which made Aunt Jenna stare at him too. "Is there a ghost in action?" she asked. "No, I don't think so," I replied. After watching the boy disappear from our sight, we went to the class. Being paranoid on this day was a given, and whomever I looked at, I kept thinking about what I might see the next minute. My entire day went in paranoia and nervousness, so to sum it all up, I could not focus on any of my classes. "Hi, you must be the new girl. I'm Susan, and I'm a year senior to you." A cheerful-looking girl came to me while introducing herself. "Oh, hi, I'm Jenna, and this is my niece Gina." Since I wasn't much of a talker, Aunt Jenna went ahead and engaged in the conversation with her. As she was talking to Susan, I noticed the same guy from this morning staring in our direction. The moment my eyes met his, he turned around and walked away. The next few days were quiet. I did my best to fit in and get along with the other students, while Aunt Jenna had no problem making friends, which made me a bit jealous of her, but I overcame that emotion. Susan started to hang out with my aunt and me, which made me open up to her little by little as well. "Hey Jenna, Gina, have you guys seen Susan anywhere? I can't seem to find it since yesterday." It was Susan's best friend, and that is when I recalled that I haven't seen her either after Friday's lunch break. "No, we haven't," Aunt replied. The same day, as we were walking from the lab to the classroom, I saw the same guy, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw Susan's spirit lurking over his shoulder and then disappeared. I thought of telling Aunt, but thinking I might be imagining things, I didn't. That very evening in the dorm, when Aunt Jenna had gone out with some other girls, I saw another ghost of an unfamiliar girl. She seemed harmless, but it looked like she was searching for something. The only ghosts I was able to see were those who were either trying to possess someone or they already had. Just then, I received a phone call from Aunt Jenna, and as I answered her, it sounded like she was whispering. "Gina, is Stacy in the dorm?" "No, didn't she go with you guys?" I replied in confusion. "Yes, but we can't seem to find her, and I think I'm in trouble because someone had been following me." After telling me this, she shared her live location and disconnected the call. I know she must be hoping that I inform the cops, but even I don't know why I decided to go there on my own. As I was getting close to the place, I could not help but feel this weird, familiar feeling, and that is when I saw the same guy I bumped into on my first day on campus. That unpleasant feeling kept getting stronger and stronger, so I sneaked around to see what he was up to. He entered an abandoned building, and I followed him in. That is when I saw Aunt Jenna and Stacy tied near a pole. Stacy's stomach was cut open, and she was bleeding while Aunt seemed fine and unconscious. My eyes lingered on the ceiling, and I was shocked to see multiple ghosts, including Susan's, lingering atop the guy who was looking at the two girls with a monstrous smile. You know what? Ghosts are frightening. They are terrifying. But what's even more terrifying than them are the people like this guy who has not an ounce of humanity in them. The reason I was extremely terrified for my life at this moment was that whenever I faced a ghost, I knew they were already dead and they won't be able to kill me. But as I was watching this guy take his sweet time tearing Susan limb from limb, I knew that my ability, my exorcist powers, were useless because there was no way anyone could remove the monster from this man. I dialed 911 with trembling hands and informed them about the situation. Luckily for me, the guy was so busy enjoying his brutality, he did not seem to notice me. He snapped back to reality the moment he noticed cops coming in, but it was too late for him to run. As he was getting arrested, I quickly went and untied Aunt Jenna to free her. I was shaking like a leaf the entire time as I helped her come to her senses and took her back to the dorm. A few days later, we were informed about the guy. His name was Carlos Simon. He was sent to a rehabilitation center when he was young for attacking an elderly woman. After his return from the place, he stayed quiet, but teenagers started to disappear one by one. In his confession, he told the cops that killing them calmed his nerves and satisfied him, which made me tremble and terrified. All I could think about after listening to all of this was that he was a soulless and emotionless monster. There was an unimaginable terror of humans that had placed the horror of ghosts in my heart now, and I couldn't help but be wary of those around me.
On the morning of Tuesday, September 20th of 1988, 19-year-old Tara Calico left her home in Belen, New Mexico to begin her daily bike ride along the New Mexico State Road. Cycling was her favorite form of exercise, and she chose a route she'd ridden every morning, without fail, for years by that point, and was often accompanied by her mother, Patty Dole. However, in recent weeks, Patty had ceased to join her daughter in her daily rides after one particularly frightening incident in which she believed the pair had been stalked by an angry motorist. Patty had implored her daughter to stop cycling at that time in the morning, or to at least take a different route, but her daughter rejected the idea and said her mother was overreacting when it was suggested that she carry mace. That Tuesday morning, Tara had noticed one of her hamstrings feeling a little tight. She mentioned this to her mother and added that if she wasn't home by 12, it was because she was probably injured, in which case her mother was to drive down the regular route to give her and her bike a ride back. We can also assume that Tara desperately wanted to be back around that time, as she had a date at around 12:30 and wanted time to get ready. And indeed, when Tara failed to return by noon, Patty drove down their usual cycling route, but couldn't locate her daughter. But what she did find were the broken pieces of what was unmistakably Tara's Sony Walkman. Patty immediately contacted the police, suggesting the broken pieces might represent some kind of trail for them to follow. Police did indeed follow the trail of broken plastic, but to no avail. Several witnesses were interviewed, each saying they had seen Tara riding her bike along the state road. One or two even added that they had noticed a light-colored pickup truck following closely behind her, but hadn't really thought anything of it at the time. Police cast a wide net in the search that followed, but not a single trace of Tara or her bicycle could be found. It was as if though she'd ridden into a black hole, like she just dropped off the face of the earth. Yet little did they know, they would be seeing Tara again. Only the circumstances in which they'd see her would be truly terrifying. On the evening of June 15th, 1989, a woman in Port St. Joe, Florida, stopped at a local convenience store. She pulled into a free parking space next to a large white windowless Toyota cargo van, and as she got out, noted that it was being driven by a mustachioed Caucasian man who appeared to be in his 30s. She then walked into the store, picked up a few choice items, then headed back out to her vehicle. The Toyota cargo van was gone, but lying in the empty parking spot was a small square Polaroid photograph. At first glance, the picture appeared to be of two people lying among some bedding, but on further inspection, the contents of the photograph made the woman's blood run cold. It showed a young boy of maybe only 7 or 8, along with a young woman in her late teens. Each appeared to have their wrists bound behind their backs with a strip of duct tape covering each of their mouths. She immediately contacted local law enforcement, who in turn set up roadblocks to intercept the vehicle. But the van was never found, and the driver never identified. Representatives from the Polaroid company offered to analyze the picture before informing police that the picture could have been taken no earlier than May of 1989, as the kind of material used to print the photo was not available until then. The Polaroid's discovery sparked a frenzy of interest in the national media, and Patty Dole was contacted by friends who believed the gagged girl looked an awful lot like Tara. The FBI then brought the photograph to Patty, who was then on convinced that the girl in the picture was her missing daughter. She cited the scar on the bound girl's leg, one that was identical to one Tara had received as a result of a car accident. Patty also noticed that a paperback copy of V.C. Andrews' novel My Sweet Adrena can be seen lying next to the girl, a book that just so happened to be Tara's all-time favorite. The United Kingdom's Scotland Yard analyzed the photo and conclusively agreed that the woman in the picture was indeed Tara, but a follow-up analysis by the Los Alamos National Laboratory disagreed, citing differences in the girl's facial structure. However, when the FBI conducted a third analysis of the photo, the results were inconclusive. They were 75% sure it was her, just enough to officially declare it, as it might muddy or misdirect any potential investigation. The other young person in the picture was thought to be young Michael Henley, also of New Mexico, who had disappeared just a few months before Tara had. Michael's mother said that she too was almost certain that it was her young son tied up in the Polaroid. Yet this is considered highly unlikely, as Michael's remains were discovered in June 1990 in the Zuni Mountains, less than 10 miles from the family's campsite he vanished from. Police believe that Michael simply wandered off and subsequently died of exposure, and if that were the case, there was no way the child in the van could be him. Two other possible Polaroid photographs of Tara had surfaced in the years since her disappearance, the first being discovered near a construction site in the small town of Montecito, California. It is a blurry photo of a girl's face, with tape covering her mouth and light blue striped fabric behind her. Many have noted the blatant similarities between the fabric to that on the pillow in the Toyota van photo. It was taken on film that was not available until June 1989. The second Polaroid depicts a woman loosely bound in gauze. Her eyes are covered with yet more gauze and large black frame glasses, and she's standing with a male passenger beside her on an abandoned Amtrak train. The film used was not available until February 1990. Calico's mother believed the first was definitely Tara, with her sister saying that the two girls had a striking, uncalming resemblance. As for me, I will not rule them out, but keep in mind our family has had to identify many other photographs, and all but those three were ruled out. Many years went by without any arrests or developments in the case. Then, in 2008, rumors spread that two teenage boys had accidentally hit Calico with a truck, panicked, and subsequently killed her, covering up their misdeeds by disposing of her corpse somewhere it would never be found. But this was dismissed as pure hearsay, and the police officer who made the comment was publicly chastised by Tara's stepfather for them. 5 more years went by, and we could be forgiven for thinking that Tara's case would remain a cold one. But in 2013, the FBI announced that they had set up a 6-person task force that was to be charged with reinvestigating Tara's abduction, citing the discovery of new evidence. Then in 2019, the FBI followed up their announcement by offering a reward of up to $20,000 for precise details leading to the identification or location of Tara Lee Calico, and information leading to the arrest and conviction of those responsible for her disappearance. So it seems the FBI are creeping ever closer to finding the person responsible for Tara's death or abduction, and that even if 30 years goes by, the powers that be will not simply allow people to go missing without doing something about it. But the question remains, was it really a freak car accident that killed Tara? One in which a terrified teen found he couldn't face the consequences? Or was Tara kidnapped by someone with much more nefarious intentions? Someone who wanted to show off his monstrous labors by displaying his quarry, bound and gagged, his playthings until he saw fit to dispose of them. But at the end of the day, we're only left to wonder in horror at Tara's fate at the hands of her captor, left only to pray that the same thing doesn't happen to us or any of our loved ones.
This story came up when I was talking to my grandma about cattle mutilations. He was talking about a deer skin being found in the woods by some guy while he was camping, and my grandmother suddenly gasped. She then went on to tell me that when she was 26, she was home alone sleeping one day, while my grandpa was at work and my mom was at school. She said that at some point in her sleep, she was startled awake by a semi-loud boom coming from the highway. She got dressed and went out to investigate, and almost immediately noticed a giant red blob right on the yellow line of the road. She said that as she neared closer to it, she realized it was a horse, a skinless horse. She described it as having absolutely no skin at all, and said that she could see every nerve, every vein, and all of the muscle on it. Dead, laying in the road. She said the truck drivers pulled over to stare at the horse as well, and that they were so weirded out by it that they just stared at it for a while. My grandmother said she called the police out there, and it was cleaned up. My mom recounted the story as well, saying that my grandmother seemed a bit on edge the whole day, and my mom remembered being a bit creeped out too. I'm not sure of how real it is, but I hope I never have to experience something like this.